Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I think it is time to discuss the popularity of 2D anime women on the internet. All of us who are perpetually online and in touch with internet culture have noted the presence of manga and anime. There are anime memes, anime avatars, and anime images. The manga and anime art style seems to be ascendant on the internet, and is the style of choice for many artists due to its versatility. The style can be used for practically any genre, whether it be action, romance, horror, comedy, or even pornography, otherwise referred to as hentai. The style's versatility makes it efficient and economical to learn. If you learn how to draw in the manga and anime style, you can draw pictures in basically any genre with any tone you want. The same is not true for the art style found in Adventure Time, for instance. You would have a hard time animating a scary or gruesome horror film using this art style. The great abundance of different genres which are found in anime is the reason why many anime viewers and fans dislike it when one says anime series are Japanese cartoons. It's not because it is inaccurate to say that anime series are cartoons made by Japanese animators, but because the word cartoon has connotations of entertainment made for children, as well as juvenile and not serious. Most anime series are not made for children, and some of them tackle serious subjects, and a number of them cannot be described as juvenile in any sense. This is where everyone in the audience realises I am referring to the anime films of Studio Ghibli. So anime fans perceive the use of the cartoon label as some kind of ignorant dismissal of the style and the films and series they enjoy. But to continue with our subject, it is easy to note the versatility of the anime and manga art style and say that this is the reason it is ascendant on the internet. But this is not sufficient, because this explanation fixates itself only on anime and manga, while ignoring any wider context. Artistic movements, traditions, and related phenomena do not pop out of nowhere. They are the result of many factors, and so, for an explanation to attempt to be comprehensive, one must look outside of the artwork or the text itself, and consider the socio-cultural context. My analysis and explanation is going to be based on personal observations, and I'm going to theorise why anime is ascendant in the Western sphere of the internet. What I am describing might not explain the situation in the African sphere of the internet, for instance. Now let us examine two strange phenomena that are occurring in Western countries, which are completely independent of anime women, but I think help explain the waifu phenomenon. The first is the fat acceptance movement, and the second is the androgyny movement. Both of these are gaining traction in the fashion industry. Efforts are being made by fashion companies and the media to normalise and promote fatness and androgyny as beautiful. Hence we see photographs of female models who look like this and this. We also see terms such as fat shaming, fat acceptance, beauty comes in all shapes and sizes, and fat is beautiful. And with the other movement we see a more general trend of undermining the concept of the gender dichotomy, and the promotion of the proposition that people should be genderless. Some people will look at these two fashion movements and think they are unrelated, but I would argue they share one quality. I don't think this is an intended effect or goal of the fat acceptance movement. But the fat acceptance movement also promotes androgyny. How, you might ask? Well, quite simply, the androgyny fashion movement deliberately tries to make men and women look alike, and one of the primary ways of doing this is to make both men and women wear clothes that conceal biological characteristics which mark them out as men and women. In practice, this means steps are taken to make women look like men, because it is more difficult to make a man look like a woman than vice versa, if of course we exclude the option of surgery. An example will demonstrate. I am presuming that this is a woman and not a boyish man. So what is going on with this woman's outfit? Well, there are several things. First, the skinny jeans. I remember when only women and individuals belonging to various music subcultures wore skinny jeans, but today almost everyone is starting to wear them. Hence they have moved from being a feminine article of clothing to an androgynous one. Second, the pose. Most women close their legs when they sit down, while men tend to open them. The model is assuming a masculine pose by opening her legs in this manner. Most important though, for this analysis, is the jumper. It is baggy and does not hug her waist or chest, so it looks like she has a square figure and a flat chest, things which are biological signifiers of masculinity rather than femininity. As an additional note, I don't think the dark lighting on the top of the jumper helps emphasise the existence of her bust. However, a change of lighting wouldn't make the jumper hug her chest any better. By de-emphasising the hourglass shape and her bosom, this woman looks like a rather boyish man rather than a woman. And this is by design. Now, the androgynous fashion designer alters the feminine frame of the woman with clothes, but the fat fashion designer does this with rolls of fat, and arguably this is the most effective means of achieving androgyny, because both men and women can get fat, and when men and women get fat, they look the same. Seriously, these two have the same blobby body type. But what does this have to do with anime women and their prevalent popularity online? Well, quite simply, androgyny and fat are not appealing. In short, they are not beautiful and attractive to men and women. Now I can see some hands rising in the audience. But your Imperial Majesty, how can you say they are not beautiful? Isn't beauty in the eye of the beholder? Isn't it all subjective? It is true for certain that there is subjectivity when it comes to beauty. For instance, we can easily imagine two gardeners arguing over which flower is the most beautiful. We can imagine one gardener saying that he likes roses, but he much prefers sunflowers. And we can imagine the second gardener stating that he likes sunflowers, but he thinks roses are better. This is an easy argument to visualize, because which flower is most pretty seems to be purely subjective. However, there are limits to this. What if the first gardener said that roses were hideous and disgusting flowers? We would likely not respond with, "Well, that's your opinion, good sir," but instead with, "Are you being serious?" Someone might well say he doesn't care for roses and get no opposition, but when someone says he thinks roses are hideous and disgusting, that is when people start to think very little of his opinion. But why don't we bring this into sharper contrast? Let's imagine a third gardener in this debate, who listens to his peers' arguments, and then says nonchalantly, "Good sirs, I would like to express my opinion. I do not believe that sunflowers or roses are the most beautiful decoration one can have in a garden. I think you are approaching this question of what looks best in a garden in a rather narrow manner, for you are thinking only of flowers. Allow me to present to you another option. Another thing which I believe to be better in a garden than sunflowers or roses, the most beautiful of garden decorations, turds. Turds stuck on spikes, driven into the ground, where you would have your flower beds. I find the sight quite beautiful, and I think the smell is most pleasant." What might the other two gardeners think of this one's opinion on what makes a beautiful garden? They would think this man was either A, joking, or B, not right in the head. Neither would think his opinion was any good, and neither would respond with some statement to the effect of, "Well, all ideas about what constitutes beauty are completely subjective, and so your opinion is as good as mine." Of course, this is an extreme example, but the point I'm trying to bring across here is that the beauty is subjective argument has its merits, but it also has its limits. We might not be able to properly quantify or qualify what is beautiful or what is ugly, but we know beauty when we see it, and we certainly know what is ugly when we see it. So what are we to think when people such as this hypothetical gardener come along and claim the ugly is beautiful? The only thing we can do is shake our heads and ignore them, because they clearly have terrible taste. It is the same with the people who argue that fat and androgynous features are beautiful. They have terrible taste. This might seem an extreme dismissal. However, there are two things to bear in mind. Number one, it isn't an extreme dismissal, but instead a healthy dismissal. And number two, no one in the fat acceptance movement or the androgynous fashion movement actually believes or thinks that the things they promote are beautiful. The fat acceptance movement is based on self-delusion. In many Western countries, most notably America, obesity is rising. As a result, there are plenty of people who are fat to the point of being visually repellent, and there are only two things a fat person can do when he realizes his rolls of fat make him deeply unappealing. The first is to own it and work towards improvement, and the second is to pretend that it actually isn't a problem. The latter is easier than the former, at least initially. The problem is, both solutions require one to go all in, and so what starts as a personal pretense, constructed for self-comfort, becomes a pretense which must be accepted and enforced on society. The reason this personal pretense must be accepted by society for the comfort of the obese person is because it is difficult to maintain an absurd belief when it is open to criticism or scrutiny. Deep down, an obese person who takes this second option knows that it is a coping mechanism, and so it is very easy for someone to remind said obese person that his sense of self-worth runs on pure cope. This is why the fat acceptance movement is a thing. It's not because people have suddenly realised that being a blob of lard is attractive. It is because fat people don't want to exercise and change their diets. They don't actually believe beauty is subjective, and therefore they can be beautiful to some people, and so, for this reason, their bodies should be promoted. They only use the beauty is subjective argument because it is a useful tool for their ends. A similar thing is at play with the androgynous fashion movement. The pushers of this fashion style are not motivated by a want for beauty. They are motivated by rejection and disdain. Rejection and disdain for classic gender roles and classic gender fashion. The pushers of this style often identify as gender neutral and completely reject the gender/sex dichotomy. But how can you reject a concept without also rejecting the symbiology and aesthetics of the concept in question? You cannot. If you have decided to create a concept or ideology which is directly opposed to the one which is established, one of the best things you can do is create new symbols and aesthetics for your new political philosophy. This is why the supporters of androgynous fashion are mixing different articles of clothing together and making new designs, because they reject the idea that there is a sex and gender dichotomy and that gender has a basis in biology. Their rejection is made manifest in their fashion. The problem androgynous fashionistas have is all their designs and fashions look weird and sometimes freakish to everyone else. So to counter anyone who points out how unappealing their fashion is, they invoke the beauty is subjective argument. But remember, they are not creating fashion because they desire beauty. They are creating it out of rejection. And like the fat acceptance movement, the beauty is subjective argument is just a useful tool to achieve their ends. I do not think it a mischaracterization to say that both fat fashion and androgynous fashion are negative, in the sense that they are defined by their rejection of something rather than by a desire for something. The fat fashion movement is characterized by its rejection of health and fitness, while the androgynous fashion movement is characterized by its rejection of the gender dichotomy. The last thing I will discuss about the beauty is subjective argument and these two fashion movements is this. If we assume that beauty is completely subjective, and it is all personal preference, then a serious question has to be asked. Why are you a fatophobe, or a fat shamer, if you state you don't find fat models attractive? Why are you small-minded and intolerant if you don't like androgynous fashion? If there is nothing objectively beautiful about fat and androgynous fashion, why should it be wrong to state you don't like these fashions? You cannot accuse someone of having poor taste if these things are not objectively beautiful. If beauty is just subjective, then surely the response to someone saying he prefers slim models to fat models should be something like, let's agree to disagree. It takes all sorts to make a world. Of course, fat and androgynous fashionistas don't believe beauty is subjective. They just use the phrase when it suits their purposes, and they have a deep conviction that everyone should think their fashions are beautiful, because on some level, fat people want to believe they are beautiful as they are. And androgynous fashionistas actually do believe androgyny is true and beautiful. But what does any of this have to do with 2D women and waifus? Why talk about this at all? Well, I think it is helping to propel the popularity of anime, because as more films, television shows, comics and cartoons in the West start to adopt the aesthetics of the androgynous and fat fashion movements, more Westerners become alienated. Nobody wants to look at this all of the time. Heck, nobody wants to look at this for even a short amount of time. Now, if we excuse some ill artists on DeviantArt and similar websites, anime women are not drawn as fat or androgynous. To be sure, there are traps, but they are actually a minority in anime series, although one trap is one trap too many. Women and girls in anime are drawn with idealized bodies, barring of course female characters who are flat-chested, often for the purposes of comic relief. But mostly, women in anime are drawn with hourglass bodies, big bosoms and wide hips, and they range from slim to voluptuous, otherwise denoted as thick. There is a strange accusation, mostly made by supporters of the fat and androgynous fashion movements, that characters who are designed to conform to traditional beauty standards all look the same, and that there is no diversity or personality in such creations. This has never been true, and is certainly not true for anime. There is a diversity of body types, hairstyles, and of personalities in anime. Contrary to popular argument, idealization in art does not lead to one sole form, but instead to various derivations of a more general ideal. Hence, you have men who argue over whether thick thighs save lives or not. However, to say that there are derivations of a form does not mean that men who argue over thick thighs, for instance, will find fat women appealing, because fat women are not a derivation of an ideal female body, as much as they are a complete rejection of it. Again, notwithstanding some bizarre and quite frankly disgusting exceptions which are hard to find in actual anime series, anime women are drawn to appeal and to be attractive. Anime women typically have beautiful bodies, long hair. If they don't have long hair, they will normally have a short yet feminine hairstyle, and nice eyes. And since Western media are slowly turning against beauty and art, it isn't surprising that people would find themselves drawn to the beauty which exists in anime, albeit in animated and idiosyncratic form. However, the beauty and appeal of anime women cannot by itself explain their popularity, nor the habit of men to have anime characters as their avatars on social media accounts, nor the convention of declaring an anime girl as one's waifu. After all, if feminine beauty is what men are after, then why haven't we seen a resurgence in pin-up art? Artists haven't stopped doing pin-up art, and there's enough beautiful pin-up art out there as it stands. Why don't we see more social media accounts with pin-up art ladies? I think we need to consider another element which makes anime women appealing to large numbers of people in the West, and that is the accompanying personalities of 2D women. I doubt this will be new knowledge to anyone, but there are several main character types into which most anime women fall. They are tsundere, yandere, kudere, and dandere. I won't bother explaining the differences between these types because what divides these types is not important. What's important are the similarities between the vast majority of anime women, including the ones who do not neatly fit into any of these character types. Anime women nearly always dress in a feminine way and act in a feminine manner. Anime women are always seen in dresses, skirts, and other gendered outfits, which emphasize that they are women. Even if they are soldiers or warriors, they tend to have haircuts and wear outfits which shout, "I am a human female, I am a woman." Compare this to Western media, where actresses are increasingly donning masculine looks or androgynous ones. Consider Charlize Theron in Mad Max Fury Road. There is nothing feminine about her appearance. She doesn't even have hair. Or how about Black Widow's outfits in the Marvel films? Scarlett Johansson keeps her head of hair, but her outfits are as such that they could be worn by either men or women without difficulty. Or how about everyone's favourite superheroine, Captain Marvel? She keeps an even fuller head of hair than Black Widow, in her first appearance at least. However, not only could her outfit be worn by either gender, but it actually is worn by both genders. It is even worn by aliens, look! But the outfit difference isn't the most important thing here, although I felt it needed pointing out. What is most important is the way anime women act, as opposed to women in most Hollywood films being released today. 2D women act more like women than 3D women in Hollywood films. Or to be more specific, 2D women act more like ladies than 3D women in mainstream films. Now, of course, femininity is tricky to pin down exactly, and it is especially difficult perhaps to determine how feminine a character is in fictional media. Broadly speaking, we could say that masculinity produces traits of character which predispose a man to be a provider, protector, and leader, while femininity produces traits of character which predispose a woman to be a nurturer, childminder, and follower. However, I have developed a simple test for measuring how feminine or ladylike a character is in a fictional medium which anyone can use, including you, ladies and gentlemen. Take a female character and imagine she is not a woman in the medium, but instead a man. See if this character's mannerisms, fashions, actions, and general personality work or don't work in a male realization. Note, for this test to be most effective, imagine the character is a man for the entirety of the film, but exclude, or modify, parts of the script which explicitly showcase the character is a woman. For instance, don't imagine this male character giving birth, because you are not testing whether plot points make sense if the character is a man. Instead, you are testing the character's mannerisms, fashions, actions, and personality to see whether they can work in a male character without seeming weird or effeminate. Allow me to demonstrate a use of this test in action. Here is a scene from the film Captain Marvel.
You guys wouldn't happen to know how these things come off, would you? No? Fine.
Now, I want to focus on her war cry right here. Already, it strikes me as extremely unfeminine, and coming from a woman, it really sets bad tones. But whenever I imagine a male Captain Marvel doing this, the scene not only works far better, but also feels more natural. I not only think this, I know this, because there is another film with a similar scene. For anyone who didn't recognise it, the film is called Willow. Now, ladies and gentlemen, time for a comparison. Which scene is more agreeable to you? Which character seems most natural, most aligned with their respective gender? Because the action in question, sounding a battle cry, seems to be masculine in nature, and this is why it works better when Mad Mardigan does it. You can also do the reverse of this test, and imagine a female character as a male in a film, and see if the character's mannerisms and personality work in a male realisation. For example, see this short clip of one of the scenes in Stephen Sommers' The Mummy.
Bridge in 1860. 1865 was. Oh, for heaven's sake, girl, it wasn't that good of a kiss anyway.
Trying to imagine the character of Evelyn as a man, we'll call him Edgar, in this scene, leads to some weird mental images. Firstly, Edgar would be wearing a nightdress, pacing around a bedroom bothered by the thought of a previously rushed kiss, and the line, "Oh, for heaven's sake, man, it wasn't that good of a kiss anyway," followed by the subsequent action of moving towards the mirror to brush his hair would make him come across as quite effeminate, especially if he had a hairstyle like this. Obviously, I have only subjected this test to a few short instances from these films in this essay, because at the moment I am just showing a proof of concept. But I think if you conducted this test on the rest of these films, you would discover that Captain Marvel is quite a masculine character, Mad Mardigan is also quite a masculine character, and Evelyn is a feminine character. Now, what would happen if we subjected the test to these anime girls? Well, we would be looking at a group of very effeminate men. God knows there are a number of these men in anime series already, and a large number of fantastic weak anime males as well, and there don't need to be more. So why don't we take Asuna from Sword Art Online as our first example? When scared by her bodyguard in Season 1, she hides behind Kirito to protect herself from Karadale, and essentially becomes a damsel in distress and needs to be rescued by Kirito. Which doesn't make sense, because since they are in a computer game, Karadale's bigger bones and superior upper body strength don't count for anything here, so she stands a good chance of beating him. Later in the series, she exposes herself in this shy/coy manner, and throughout the episode she makes food, including sandwiches, for Kirito. Now let's imagine Asuna is a teenage boy. We'll call him Osuno, rather than a teenage girl doing all these things. Well, Osuno would be incredibly effeminate and anything but masculine if he did these things and acted like Asuna does throughout the series. Or why don't we take Hestia from Is It Wrong to Try and Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon Season 1? Even more so than Asuna, Hestia is highly emotional, and her emotions change every couple of seconds in every scene, it appears. Note how she acts when Belle comes back from the dungeon after a nearly fatal trip.
神様、今帰りました。はい、ちょっとダンジョンで死にかけちゃって。大丈夫なのかい？痛くはないかい？もし君に死なれたら僕はショックだよ。
If I'm honest, I find it more difficult to imagine Hestia as a teenage guy than Asuna. The same goes for Hiyori in Noragami. It is not so much the things she does which define her as feminine, but more her way of doing said things. Most of the things she does in the series are not strictly gendered, but the manner in which she does them would make audience members judge the character as effeminate if she were a boy or man. I can hear an objection from some detractors. Your Imperial Majesty, this test has problems. Let us take Evelyn from The Mummy. Yes, in many scenes she does things which are easily described as feminine, and she also does things in a manner which we could describe as womanly too. However, She also does things which are masculine in nature. Consider how she shoots a man. Maybe she doesn't do it with great cool, but she does kill a man in self-defense, and she stabs a man in the face with a burning candle. How can we describe her as a feminine character when she does these masculine acts? This is an easy objection to address, because whether a character is masculine or feminine is not determined solely from doing actions which are 100% aligned with his or her gender, because it is both a matter of frequency and a state of being. We don't say a woman who is perfectly ladylike under normal conditions is unfeminine because she sometimes loses her temper in times of stress, or because one of her interests is in armoured vehicles. We don't say that a man who is very manly under normal conditions is not masculine because he cries when under intense stress, or because he likes practicing flower arrangement. The assertion that a man can only be described as masculine if he is a perfect exemplar of masculinity, or vice versa if a woman is the subject of discussion, is a cunning argument used by those who support the notion that people should be gender neutral. But this is a straw man. Very few actually hold what could be called a purist position on the subject of masculinity and femininity, and understand that human beings are complex creatures and circumstances affect people's actions. The position that people such as myself hold is that men should try to be masculine and women should try to be feminine. But none of us holds the opinion that men should try to be caricatures of masculinity, and vice versa for women. And, as alluded to before, the reason why we hold this position is because we believe that masculinity and femininity are both natural states of being, and when men and women embrace their unique natures, they find life more fulfilling, and everyone is happier as a consequence. So having established that 2D women are more feminine than most women in Western media, why is this important? And how does this help answer the original query? It's tremendously simple. Men like feminine women more than they like masculine women. Sexual dimorphism exists in many animal species, including the human species, and thus human beings are attracted to the qualities of the sex which is opposite to theirs, thus highlighting and emphasizing the physical and personality differences which distinguish a man from women, makes a man more attractive to women, and vice versa. Men want womanly women, and women want manly men. So is it any wonder that men find 2D women appealing, considering that they are super feminine? And is it any wonder that 2D women are surging in popularity at a time where Western women are being encouraged to LARP as men? It's not surprising at all. So I have argued that anime women are rather feminine and ladylike, and I would argue this gives them an edge over something like pinup art. Because, while there is much appealing pinup art online, and while there are still artists who create such images, they are just pictures. Any personality a pinup art woman has comes from the picture she inhabits. Her body language, her outfit, her surroundings, her facial expression, and anything else which might inform us about her can only be found in the image. Now, of course, pinup art women tend to be feminine, and are sometimes ladylike in their presentation, but they can never be as feminine as a girl or woman who has an associated animated series with dialogue, actions, and character conflicts which showcase her femininity. The anime women who are commonly claimed as waifus are the ones who appear in actual anime series, where their femininity can be displayed to a degree which is impossible for still 2D images. Thus, an anime woman is going to have a greater feminine appeal than a pinup art woman. Nevertheless, this is only half the answer to the popularity of 2D anime women online and offline. Throughout history, artists have created people with idealized proportions and attractive features. Let's consider pinup art once more. We can explain why pinup art isn't doing so well by pointing to the relatively small number of artists who still paint and draw in the pinup art style, and the more potent femininity that comes from anime women. However, in the past, there were more artists who followed the pinup art tradition, and there were no anime women to compete with. Why didn't we see something similar to the waifu phenomenon in the 1960s, but with pinup art women? During the period where pinup art was at its height, it was well known that soldiers on the battlefield had a habit of painting women on the side of their military vehicles. And this still happens. However, while this did indeed happen, and while pinup art was popular, body pillows were certainly not prevalent, and there was no pinup art movement equivalent to the modern weeaboo upsurge. Men and boys in the early 20th century were not exchanging pictures of pinup art women and saying to each other, "I claim this one as my wife," or "this is my wife," in a manner similar to weeaboos online. Why only now do we see discussions about waifus and waifu claiming? This could be explained by the invention of the internet and other mass media. However, I find this explanation unsatisfying, because even when I imagine the internet existing in the 1950s, I cannot imagine any men or boys treating pin-up art women in the same way anime women are treated online today. I think there is a better explanation. Today's youth and young adults, 20 to 30-year-olds, are having less sex. Researchers have been noting this since 2015. In 2016, a study in Great Britain revealed that only 15% of millennials had sex in the last year. Recently, there was a bombshell in the form of the General Social Survey, which found that 28% of American men between the ages of 18 and 30 had not had sex in the last year. For women, the number was 18%. To contrast, in 2008, only 10% of men between 18 and 30 years of age had not had sex in the last year, and only around 8% of women. Now, figures of 15 and 28% might sound low. However, if these samples are representative of the wider populations, then this is actually a lot of people. A YouTuber called Monday Blue, who commented on this earlier last year, made a good point when he said that during the Great Depression in America, only about 20% of men were unemployed, and the effects of this were felt in American society, to say the least. I have read many explanations as to why the sex rates in Western societies have fallen so low, but I'm not making this video to explain why this has happened. I bring up the fact it has happened because it is relevant to this current discussion. If you have a large section of the male population who cannot get into relationships or cannot have sex for whatever reason, then you have a large section of the male population who are not enjoying sex and love, but who want to enjoy these things. When people cannot get what they want for whatever reason, they either try to find a way to do without, or they find a substitute. Pornography is one such substitute, and I imagine that pornographers are looking at the previous figures I have presented and are rubbing their hands with glee. But if pornography is such an accessible substitute, why are anime girls and waifus even a thing online? Surely hand-drawn 2D women cannot compete with real 3D women. However, the 2D woman has an appeal which the 3D prostitute in the pornographic video does not. To keep this concise, anime females are often good, noble women, while prostitutes in pornography are the complete opposite. In a lot of the anime I have watched, most of the anime girls fall into either the beautiful yet virginal and shy character type, or the beautiful and forward character type. In most anime I've seen, the only women who act like harlots are the villains. This is deliberate. The girls in these anime series often wear revealing clothes and are drawn to be pretty, but are also written carefully, so they do not act like harlots, thus ensuring they make good love interests for the protagonist. They would not make good love interests if they were attempting to get together with lots of different men. The audience would look at these female characters, think they were harlots, or potential harlots, and subsequently think very little of them. As it happens, anime girls have tunnel vision for the male protagonists in their respective series, so they do not attempt to attract any other guys. This makes them appealing to male audience members because they are, mostly, perfect women. They are not only feminine, beautiful, and attractive, but also extremely loyal, and they are virgins in most cases. And even if they are not, they do not act like harlots. Women like this, of course, could make excellent wives and companions, and perhaps even good mothers. Some will point out that the personalities of anime women are often two-dimensional. However, in comparison to prostitutes in pornography, their personalities are very much three-dimensional. And let's face it, even if an internet prostitute has a three-dimensional personality, she is still a prostitute, and her character is not worthy of any praise or adoration. I know for certain that nobody in my audience is a pathetic orbiter of internet harlots, aka a simp, but if by some remote chance a simp has taken a break from bidding his bank account savings on a jar of second-hand bathwater and is watching this video, you know deep down everything I've said here is true. I don't think I presented my points very well here, so I shall try again. Just to be clear, I don't think people on the internet are primarily using anime women as pornographic objects. My argument is that they are using 2D women as romantic objects. I think it is simplistic and banal to only infer that men are not getting enough sex when considering the previous statistics. It might be true, but the studies reveal something far worse, which is, of course, related to the lack of sex. Namely, that too many men are not getting into romantic relationships and so are not enjoying romantic companionship. Arguably, pornography can satiate a person's sexual appetite, but cannot, for reasons previously mentioned, act as a romantic fantasy. For a man to fantasize about being in a relationship with a prostitute, he would have to think very little of himself, and no man wants to think he deserves nothing better than a prostitute as a romantic partner. So it is better, and more agreeable, for a man to fantasize about being in a relationship with an anime woman than it is to fantasize about being in a relationship with a prostitute. I think a similar thing is at play with romance novels. The romance novel scene is still very much alive, due to the romantic fantasies and the romantic objects which can be found in these books. Women want to fantasize about being swept off their feet by extraordinary men, not average run-of-the-mill men, and in a similar vein, men want to fantasize about being in relationships with beautiful, loyal, and feminine women. This video is getting long, so let us reach a conclusion. In short, the waifu phenomenon and the popularity of 2D anime women online can be explained by the slow abandonment of beauty in Western media, particularly the beauty of differences between the sexes, and the masculinization of women in both Western society and media. The high levels of beauty and femininity present in anime women contrast most strongly with women as they currently are in Western media and even Western society, and thus appeal strongly to Western men who are finding it increasingly difficult to attract girlfriends and wives. If you enjoyed this video, you are cordially invited to share, like, and subscribe to this channel, not only on YouTube, but also on BitChute. And thank you all for watching. I hope you all have an excellent day.